Resting for the night, Shiro woke up rather early in the morning, though with how it looked outside, it was hard to tell if it was day or night since it doesn't change. It looked just the same as when she arrived in this place. "Morning," a voice called out as she stepped out of her room. Glancing to the side, she saw Nantien giving her a small wave. Morning. How was your rest?" Shiro asked while giving her body a stretch. "It was pretty good. The beds here are rather comfy." Nantien smiled as Shiro nodded her head. "So what are the plans today then?" he asked curiously. "Well, Gramps said that he wanted to help me deal with the whole energy thing, so we're going to a pocket dimension. A day out here is around a month or so in there, I think. Not sure, though, since he didn't tell me the details," Shiro said as Nantien raised his eyebrow. "Oh, does he have access to a private dungeon or something similar?" Nantien asked curiously. Something of the sort. Apparently, it was an additional benefit from working with Hades." Shiro shrugged as Nantien nodded. "Interesting. Perhaps I should try to make the most of my time here, too. Seeing as how you can keep your true spirit nature activated permanently in this realm, I should see if there's a secret to the energy here or something. After reaching Tier 6, things like this are rather important." Nantien smiled. True. If you ask my mom, I'm sure she wouldn't mind helping you out. I do have a question for you, though. You focus on using light and you can compress it down into a laser, right?" Shiro asked. "And I can. Why do you ask?" Nantien nodded his head with mild confusion. "Well, if you can compress it to be as thin as a wire, you can thread them into a net and attack your enemies with a net that can cut them or rather melt them upon contact." Shiro smiled. "After reaching Tier 6, your main focus isn't power, but rather technique and use of your chosen element. For something rather powerful and diverse like light, you need to be more creative." Hearing this, Nantien nodded his head as he summoned an orb of light before trying to compress it down. As the orb continued to shrink, Shiro noticed that it was becoming rather unstable. "Stop!" Shiro called out. "What is it?" Nantien asked as he stopped compressing the orb. "The orb is too unstable. Maybe you should work on stability rather than compressing. We know you're good at compressing, but it's too unstable." Shiro narrowed her eyes. Dismissing the orb, Nantien nodded his head. "I have been struggling with the stability of my element, but I've been working on it in my free time. Even though I don't have the element of fire, light does get quite volatile once I begin to condense it." He sighed, as Shiro smacked him on the back. "Just keep trying. Light is similar to fire. They can be both calm and volatile. Since I don't focus on the light element, it's up to you to find out the properties yourself. Since Tier 7 is the realm of demigods, you need to discover your own path to divinity, I suppose. Though, with what Gramps had said, once I get a better understanding of divine energy, there's the chance that I can give you some small insights, as well as help you come in contact with divine energy much sooner." Shiro grinned as Nantien nodded his head with a small smile. "Rangovas. Heis, I'm Tier 6, but you're already a demigod at Tier 5. Nantien sighed. "What? Don't compare yourself with me, huh? I've already lived through 2 other lives with the first reaching Tier 6 and the second studying the crap out of magic." Shiro chuckled as Nantien shrugged. "And yet your 3rd life is the most ridiculous of all. Where do I even begin with your achievements?" Nantien smiled helplessly. "Who knows?" Talking for a little while, they saw Mio walking towards what seemed to be the main hall. "Mum," Shiro called out as Mio glanced back and saw Shiro. "Did you have a good rest?" Mio asked while giving her a hug. I did. Where's Gramps? I want to ask him more about the whole pocket dimension thing," Shiro asked. "Your grandfather's talking to your grandmother right now. We can get some breakfast first." Mio smiled. Can I ask a question, Mum?" Shiro asked after nodding her head. "Go on." "Why do you seem absent-minded?" Shiro asked as her mother was more outgoing when they were on Earth, but after they entered this realm, she seemed to be rather reserved. "But I guess I'm just missing your father." Mio sighed while stroking Shiro's hair. "Can't you go back and visit him?" Shiro asked. "I can, but I won't be able to come back to this realm for a long time since there's a cooldown of sorts for activating the key again. If I left, you wouldn't be able to get out for a while." Mio shook her head. "I see. Well, I'm sure Dad misses you just as much." Shiro reassured with a smile. Seeing this, Mio smiled and lifted Shiro up. Seeing you like this reminds me of when you used to comfort me years ago." Mio grinned as Shiro blushed in embarrassment. After all, she was a grown woman who's being lifted up like a child. "Can you let me down?" Shiro asked with a blush. Nodding her head, Mio let Shiro down before stretching her body a little. "Perhaps I need to work out or something to clear my mind," Mio said as Shiro thought about it for a moment. "Mom, when I'm training with Gramps, maybe you can train with Nantien. You're one of the most offensive fighters that I've seen, so maybe you can help him get used to combat with someone who fights offensively like you." Shiro suggested as Mio raised her eyebrow. That could be helpful, Mio admitted. There aren't many people who are as aggressive as you or your daughter, but it would be good practice. Nantien nodded his head. Plus, you can also tell her some secrets about Tier 6, no? Who knows, maybe Mum can reach a new tier while you're training. Shiro smiled. Discussing some plans, they agreed with Mio helping Nantien train while he would try to tell her about how to reach Tier 6. Arriving at the dining hall, they had some breakfast before a messenger found them. The message was rather simple as it could be, condensed down to the two elders waiting for their arrival in the main hall. Quickly finishing their meal, they made their way to the main hall. Pushing open the door, they saw Callus and Citral sitting on the throne and waiting with a smile. Shiro, your granny gave us permission. Callus grinned while giving her a thumbs up. However, when he said this, Citral frowned and glared at him. Who? Are you calling Granny? Anyways, it's like what he said, you can go, but there is a time limit since the different dimensions are becoming unstable with the new age around the corner. You can stay in there for around 2 days without a problem. But anything past that, and there's a chance for something to go wrong. We also have a rather important guest with us today. Citral smiled as Shiro tilted her head. Sensing a surge of energy besides them, Shiro recognized it to be divine energy. Seeing a familiar figure appear, Shiro's smile turned to a grin. Didn't think I'd see you again so soon. She laughed as Hades smiled and shrugged his shoulder. Neither did I. I'm more surprised to find out that you're a demigod now and that you're actually the granddaughter of 2 old friends of mine. Hades chuckled. The only reason he could appear here rather easily was because this is technically his realm in some regards, so the system restrictions were a bit looser. Well, I didn't think you'd know my grandparents either. Anyways, what brings you here? Shiro asked as Hades thought about it for a moment before opening his mouth. Since you're working on using divine energy, your grandfather had asked me for a favor, and that favor is helping you out with this task. Hades smiled as he was going to be her teacher for the next 2 days in the pocket dimension. Excuse me? Shiro asked with slight surprise. I'm your teacher for 2 days, or rather 2 months in the pocket dimension. Hades replied with a small laugh. Remembering the figure of the fearless woman traversing the steps of Mount Olympus and facing Zeus without hesitation, Hades couldn't help but find the girl in front of him acting rather cute right now. It was like she was a lost kitten confused about where she was. I'll be honest, I'm not trying to be rude, but the fact that I now have a god for a teacher for the next 2 days is rather astonishing. Shiro shrugged. And we'll just think of it as a senior instructing a junior then. After all, you are a demigod now and perhaps even a god in the future. Hades smiled as Shiro nodded her head. In that case, then I'll be under your care. Nodding his head, Hades glanced towards Nantien. Young lad, I didn't expect to see you again. Hades smiled as Shiro raised her eyebrow. Okay, what the hell? Why does everyone know each other? She asked with a twitching smile. Well, I have also completed the god trials, so it's only natural that I ran into Hades. Nantien chuckled, since he didn't follow the party last time because of 2 reasons. One, he was busy ascending to Tier 6, and the other was that he had already completed the trials. He wouldn't be able to climb the mountain again. I guess, but you two seem well acquainted, Shiro asked as Hades chuckled. That's because he was rather friendly when he climbed up the mountain. While he did take some rest, he took the time to converse with a few of the gods. Naturally, I found this rather interesting, so I had a talk or 2 with him. Hades explained as Shiro nodded her head. I see. Right then. Anyways, enough with the second meeting, I suppose. Shall we start the training? We have limited time after all, Shiro asked as Mio chuckled. So hasty with training. Reminds me of your father when he was younger. Mio smiled as Callus twitched hearing Mio mention Koji. Don't talk about that brat. I'm still rather peeved about the way he had kidnapped you from here. He does realize that he could have been a bit more respectful, right? Callus complained as Citral rolled her eyes. Ignore him. He just didn't like the fact that your father flipped him off when he left with Mio. He should know where the pocket dimension is, so I'll let him escort you there with Lord Hades. Citral smiled. I thought I told you about referring to me as Lord. Just call me casually. I'm not like my brother who's so persistent about honorifics. Hades sighed. And that is true. Zeus was rather annoyed about my attitude. Shiro shrugged. Talking for a little longer, Callus led the way as Hades and Shiro followed behind him. Glancing back, Shiro gave Nantien a thumbs up and wave. Seems like the relationship between you two is rather good. Callus smiled as Shiro nodded her head. He's been a great help to me. Plus, he's a friend of mine from when I was a kid. Shiro replied with a smile. Seeing this, Hades glanced back between the two of them as a smile slowly formed on his face. I see. He chuckled. What are you thinking about? Shiro asked curiously. Nothing much. I know your trial must have gone well considering that you're a demigod now, but if you don't mind me asking, I'm rather curious about what had happened. Hades asked as Shiro placed her hand on her chin. Run up to this S. Well, I guess I was sent to a different world of sorts. Have you ever heard of something called the Forgotten Realms? Shiro asked. Not exactly, but I have heard of one or two rumors. It's a realm that's completely sealed off from the real world, unless you have a key, no? Hades replied. I was tasked with clearing a few trials as well as some hidden objectives in that realm. I completed it a little ahead of schedule since there was a hidden task, but it allowed me to reach demigod status. It also allowed me to get this little soul warden of mine, Shiro said with a smug smile. Summoning the lantern, Hades looked at it with interest. How fascinating. You've actually made your own soul prison. If I had to describe it, it's literally a miniature hell. Hades said as Shiro nodded her head. That was the plan. Speaking of which, I did also have a little tea party with the primordial gods. Shiro mentioned offhandedly as Hades paused in his footsteps for a moment before collecting himself. Pardon? You had a tea party with the primordial gods? He asked just to make sure that he was hearing things correctly. After all, she could have said she had a tea party and talked about the primordial gods. There were a few times that he had misheard things in life, so it was better to make sure that the information he had received was accurate. Yep, you heard right. I was able to have a small talk with Tartarus, Oranos, Gaia, Kronos, and Nyx. They're going to help me, I suppose, in the new age in hopes that I would win, Shiro replied, as Hades opened and closed his mouth a few times like a broken door. He didn't know how to react since not even Zeus was able to have a casual talk with the primordial gods, and yet Shiro was now having their support in the background for the new age. I see, Hades said after a moment of hesitation. And now you've broken him. Who is next on your hit list? You've broken humans, spirits, monsters, admins, demons, and even gods now. Next thing you know, you're going to mentally break the creator of the universe. Nimue asked, while laying down on an island lazily. Taking Hisuel's advice, she had vowed to not give a single crap for the next week. If she did, the Mana Realm would be in shambles right now. Surely it's not that bad now. He seems rather composed after knowing the truth. Shiro replied. Of course. Otherwise his dignity as a god would be thrown out the window. Nimue shrugged. I guess. Surely I'm not that bad, right? Staying silent, Nimue took a deep breath. Need a table? Yes, please. Making a table for Nimue, Shiro watched as she grabbed the surface with both hands. Rah! Flipping it as hard as she could, Shiro watched as it disappeared off into the distance. Whistle. Impressive. Shiro clapped her hands as Hisuel held up an imaginary 10 from the distance. Huffing slightly, Nimue glanced at Shiro before planting herself in the mana ocean that surrounds the islands. She would have drowned already should she not be a water spirit. Shaking her head, Shiro focused back on reality. Following behind Calus and Hades, they made their way through the realm as semi-translucent steps appeared, connecting the islands to one another. Snapping his fingers, a magic circle appeared in front of Calus as he made a small cut on his finger and completed the magic circle. Suddenly, the magic circle expanded out in front of him and formed a portal of sorts. This is the pocket dimension. The moment we enter, the timer will start, and for the next 48 hours, or rather 2 months, it'll be non-stop training in hopes of you honing the divine energy within you. Are you ready? Calus asked with seriousness. This was different compared to what Shiro had seen in the main hall, as she knew he was no longer joking around. Nodding her head with determination burning in her eyes, Shiro prepared herself mentally, as both Hades and Calus nodded their heads with satisfaction. Opening the portal properly, they stepped inside. Meanwhile, Mio led Nantien to a different training area in the realm. Preparing a few weapons, she glanced at him. So then, I have a question for you, Mio said as she glanced back at him. Min, what is it? Nantien replied. Speaking as Shiro's mother, I want to know what you think of her. You're quite attached, aren't you? Mio said as she flickered next to him and placed her hand on his shoulder. Despite him being tier 6, he almost lost sight of her, which only showed her true power. Since my baby girl seemed to be rather close to you, I want to make sure you're actually a decent person. Mio narrowed her eyes, as she was going to make sure she gets his true answers during this training period. Right then, as you know, divine energy is very different compared to mana, as it is not only more powerful, but it is also much more diverse than mana. What you can't do with mana is mostly achievable with divine energy. Hades immediately started the lesson, as Shiro listened carefully. For example, with mana, controlling souls has its limits, but with divine energy, I can use souls as a different fuel source. Snapping his fingers, Shiro could see two malevolent illusionary figures appear as their astral bodies writhed before being forcefully transformed into two wolves. These are soul-corrupting wolves. Using the malevolent energy stored within them, they can cause the victim of their attacks to feel great pain during an attack as they harm the soul directly. With mana, performing this task would be rather hard due to its limitations. Another keynote that you have to remember is that being a god is to transcend normality, which you seem to have no problem with. You are still constrained mentally as you are too used to using mana. Your thought process is stuck on the line of what mana is able to accomplish rather than what mana is unable to accomplish. For example, I want you to think about what mana is unable to accomplish right now, Hades asked with a smile. Hearing this, Shiro nodded her head as she thought about the question. With mana being so diverse, it was hard to pick out what it can't do, but with the way Hades had put it, it seemed like there were quite a bit of restrictions when it comes to mana. Furrowing her brows, Shiro opened her mouth. Would turning back time be one of them? Shiro asked. A little, but not quite. Mana is able to turn back the time within a single object if your mastery is good enough. You are also able to turn back time in an area should there be enough mana and mastery, but doing so has its drawbacks and backlashes. However, with divine energy accomplishing something such as turning back time is possible. Of course, there are still certain restrictions you have to abide by. Otherwise, the system backlash would be harsh, but compared to the restrictions when using mana, it is much better. Of course, if you're like Kronos, turning back time is quite a simple task, as he has the divinity for it, Hades explained as Shiro nodded her head. What am I able to do with my divinity, then? Shiro asked as she summoned a mass of nanobots. That's it for you to find out, as you know your element the best. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gotten the divinity. Though a tip for you is that you should think about what was difficult or impossible for you to do when you had this element before, Hades replied as Shiro nodded her head. The first thing that we're going to have you master is how you're going to make use of divine energy without entering your demigod form. Hades smiled as Shiro nodded her head. The training consisted of Hades injecting some of his divine energy into Shiro, as she would try to sense where it is being stored and see if she could tap into it. However, doing so was actually much harder than what Shiro had expected, since sensing divine energy was much harder than what she initially thought. With her large reserve of mana, it was quite hard to single out the small amounts of divine energy that Hades injected, as her body couldn't handle too much. For Shiro, who had a rather easy time doing everything mana-related, she was now stuck at the first step in using her divine energy. Don't rush it. Demigods who can freely wield divine energy are quite rare, as they are not full god yet. Once they are, all of their energy will be turned to divine energy, so it becomes much easier to sense it at that stage. But for you, you're only tier 5, so it could be a while before you become a god, Hades said as he could tell that she was becoming a little restless. Hearing this, Shiro took a deep breath and calmed herself down, since there was no point trying to force her way through everything. Days turned into weeks, but Shiro continued to struggle as it felt impossible for her to grasp the feeling that Hades was talking about. When she ascends into demigod form, all of her energy is converted, so that wouldn't be what she needed, as it didn't reveal the true location. All it did was convert her mana into divine energy. Ranabez taking a break, Shiro sat by, sighed and closed her eyes. Trying her best to understand her own body, she only grew more and more frustrated, as this seemed to be outside of her reach. Sighing heavily, Shiro scratched her hair. Maybe you need to relax more. After all, you are challenging an unfamiliar concept, Nimue said as Shiro furrowed her brows. I guess, but I only have 2 months in here and weeks have already passed. If I don't grasp it soon, it'll only get more annoying to do later, since I won't have this kind of leisure time with everything else I need to do, Shiro replied. Do you want to try something risky, then? Nimue asked as she took a deep breath. She had an idea, but doing so was rather dangerous. However, with Shiro's healing skills, it should be possible. What idea is it? Shiro asked. Break your links again, Nimue said with a serious expression as Izuel widened her eyes. Nimue, what are you saying? You know that if Shiro does that, there's a chance that her body could collapse. Izuel frowned. I didn't say it without thinking. With Grace and her other healing skills, repairing her body is a simple task. The only thing we need to be careful of is maintaining her body while she breaks it. If she breaks her mana links, mana won't be able to circulate properly, which means that your body will stop being reinforced by the passive circulation of mana. With this, you should be able to focus on sensing the divine energy. Nimue explained, as Shiro considered her logic and nodded her head. That does make sense. I'm having trouble searching for the divine energy since my mana is simply too overwhelming. If I cut it off for a short time, the void should allow me to find divine energy, Shiro muttered as she took a deep breath. Nimue, I'll need your help. When I break my links, since my mind will be focused on not killing myself by accident. Since I'm level 300 plus, the chances of me just exploding is rather high. While I carefully break the links, I'll need you to make sure they don't go rampant from the energy that's released. Can you do that? Shiro asked with a serious expression. Nodding her head, Nimue only chuckled. I've been doing that for a while now with how reckless you can be. Hearing this, Shiro smiled as she glanced towards Hades. I'm going to try something that could help me find divine energy. I'll need you to inject it into me while I'm doing this, Shiro said as Hades raised his eyebrow. Oh, what are you planning? He asked curiously as he understood that she had been having some troubles in the past week when trying to use divine energy. I'm planning to break my links so that a void is formed. With the absence of mana circulating my body, my senses should be focused on the next thing that can keep me alive, which would be divine energy, Shiro explained as Kalis frowned. Absolutely not. Breaking your mana links at this stage is akin to suicide. I'm not letting my granddaughter do this. Kalis shook his head as Shiro sighed. Gramps, trust me, I've done worse. So will you help me? Shiro turned back to Hades, who was silent. Sure, but if I sense anything that is wrong, I'll heal you immediately, Hades said as Shiro nodded her head. Adjusting her sitting position, she signaled to both Hades and Nimue as she took a deep breath. Biting her lips, she slammed her palm against her abdominal area as a surge of mana crashed into her body. Gritting her teeth, Shiro tried her best not to cry out, as the pain of having your links broken was beyond anything she had experienced so far. This was akin to ripping out her own bone one by one, as her links made up for her foundation as an adventurer. Controlling her mana, she could sense the invisible hand had grabbed her links. Focusing her mind, she destroyed her links in an instant, as Nimue immediately started to make sure Shiro didn't die. Coughing up a mouthful of blood, Shiro's body twitched in pain as she almost fell forward. Before Hades or Kalis could help her, she forced herself to sit back up straight. I'm ready, Shiro said as she glanced at Hades. Furrowing his brows, he could sense that her internals were completely in shambles. The fact that she was even alive was a miracle, and that was coming from the god of death. Placing his hand on her back, he started to inject his divine energy into her body. Feeling the cooling sensation spread through her body, Shiro focused her mind towards that trail as her mana stopped circulating through her body. For a being that essentially lives on mana, this was akin to taking out their lungs and trying to find new ones before they died without proper respiration. However, at this moment, Shiro's mind was solely focused on finding the source of her divine energy. While this was happening, Nimue had sweat rolling down her face as she was repairing and maintaining the mana realm as best as she could. Even though she shouldn't heal the mana links right now, she could relieve the pain as well as the stress on Shiro's body. But to do this, she was essentially acting as the medium. With all of Shiro's mana flowing into Nimue so that it didn't go rampant, it was surprising for Nimue to actually be able to focus on her task. The ocean surrounding the islands was boiling right now as something akin to a natural disaster could be observed from Izuel and Estrella's point of view. While their faces were full of worry, Atesh waddled over to Nimue as he placed a hand on her back. "Meh? What is it, Addie? Your aunt here is doing something important," Nimue said with a forced smile, but without saying anything, Addie only focused his mind as fire erupted out of him. Arching through the air, the fire danced around for a moment before morphing into a giant tree which supported the roof of the Mana realm. Feeling reinvigorated, Nimue glanced at Addie in surprise, as fire continued to erupt out without signs of stopping. Strangely enough, the fire did not burn anything at all. Instead, the island seemed to blossom as even the ice island gave birth to what seemed to be ice flowers. While Nimue didn't know what was happening, Izuel knew since she had a connection to nature. Sensing the abundance of life energy within the fire, Izuel was shocked, since it was something that was similar to the world tree, but it seemed to almost be more potent. All of Shiro's mana that she had decided to cut off flowed into the two spirits as they worked to maintain her mana realm. Addie's flames continuously healed her body as the ambient mana was the fuel, while Nimue made sure that everything was balanced, as Addie's flames were still flames in the end. Too much, and Shiro's body would still be in danger, with both fire and water working side by side within Shiro's body. The pain from shattering her links slowly disappeared as her face relaxed. While this was happening, Shiro's consciousness seemed to trace the divine energy into the deeper recesses of her soul. The concept of time seemed to disappear as Shiro traced the energy. It was unknown when the scenery changed, but by the time she had noticed the shift in scenery, the mana realm could no longer be seen. She was floating in the middle of a void as trails of light seemed to disappear in this spot. "It's rather empty right now, isn't it?" A voice rang out as Shiro quickly turned back in shock. Seeing Kuromi walk past her with a smile, Shiro's eyes teared up as she immediately hugged her. "But haha, we haven't met for so long, and you've actually become a crybaby." Kuromi smiled, softly and stroked Shiro's hair. Meh. Not denying this, Shiro continued to hug, as she refused to let go of her in fear of losing her again. If you keep hugging me like this, I won't be able to breathe. Kuromi laughed as Shiro glanced up from Kuromi's bosom. But what if you disappear? Shiro asked as there were still tears in her eyes. Seeing Shiro act this way, Kuromi's heart softened as she stroked Shiro's hair. It's all right. We're in the deepest parts of our soul right now. I won't be going anywhere anytime soon. Plus, even Nitri is here. Kuromi glanced back as Shiro could see a lonesome figure sitting with an absent expression. Ranav is glancing. Towards the two, she only waved her hand slightly before staying silent. Seeing this, Shiro remembered how antisocial she was when she reached Tier 6 because she had killed her best friend. But after finding out that Acelia was still around, Shiro's guilt soon became relief as she could see her again. Are you okay? Shiro didn't know why she had asked that question, but it was as if something inside her soul wanted her to ask her past self. Glancing towards Shiro, Nitri smiled sadly. I don't know. I'm lost. Nitri shook her head as Shiro furrowed her brows. Glancing back as Kuromi, Shiro bit her lip as she didn't want to leave her embrace just yet. Let's go together. Kuromi chuckled. Walking towards Nitri, the two sat down next to her. So where are we? Shiro asked while glancing around her. I don't know, but I would argue that this seems to be where the divine energy is being kept. Kuromi shrugged while poking Nitri's cheeks. Glancing to the side, Nitri ignored this and looked at Shiro. Are you happy? She asked, which confused Shiro, but she nodded her head. I am. I got family and friends. Times are tough, but they're not bad. Shiro replied with a smile. Hearing this, Nitri smiled, but it wasn't a sad smile like before. That's good. Nitri chuckled. So I'm the third incarnation then? Shiro asked, as there were only 3 of them here. Nitri, the Nanomancer, Kuromi, the eldest daughter of the Asakura clan, and now Shiro, the demigod. Yes, you are. I suppose you're like a fusion of us two, Kuromi said while resting her chin on Nitri's shoulder. But at the same time, you're you. The 3 of us are similar to separate entities, but we are the same person. Nitri smiled. So, why are we here then? Shiro asked. Because you wanted to find the source of your divine energy, no? You followed the trail and you found this place. Kuromi smiled. But before we do anything else, can I ask you something, lil sis? Kuromi asked as Shiro nodded her head. Are you able to give me up? Kuromi asked with a somewhat sad smile. Hearing this, Shiro felt as though her heart stopped. We're the past now, and you have to look towards the future. Just like how you were able to give me up, you have to learn to give up Kuromi too. We're your foundations, I suppose. You can't keep clutching to us. You used to rely on me, Nitri, but you've outgrown that now. You've learned to depend on the you who is Shiro rather than Nitri of the past, Nitri said as Kuromi nodded. And now you need to do the same with me. Kuromi finished as Shiro didn't know what to say. So I can't bring you back? Shiro asked, as tears welled up again. Unfortunately, no. There can't be 2 of the same person at once. If there are 2, one must die. The only reason we could talk before was because of the special circumstances in the quest. You need to grow up and learn to give up on things, Shiro. Kuromi sighed as it pained her to see Shiro continuously pursue her revival, even though it was impossible. But what if I don't want to give up on you? Shiro replied stubbornly. So stubborn. Nitri smiled as Kuromi agreed. What can we even do if you refuse to move on? I don't want to leave on a sour note. Kuromi smiled sadly as Shiro bit her lip. She understood that she had to move on. She understood this for a while now, but she truly didn't want to give up on her big sis. Holding back her tears, Shiro looked back at her 2 past incarnations. I'll become the strongest. I'll defeat all the queens. I won't give up. I'll live a proper life. I'll find Acelia, and I'll protect the people I love. I won't let them suffer, and I'll put an end to all of this. I won't disappoint the 2 of you, Shiro promised as she gritted her teeth. Despite wanting to hold back the tears, they continued to pour as the realization kicked in for Shiro. This was going to be the final meeting between them as she understood where this was. This was the core of her soul. If these 2 disappear from here, they won't reappear. Good. We believe in you. Kuromi smiled as specks of light appeared in the void. One by one, they lit up as Shiro broke past the only bottleneck that had been holding her back unconsciously. Like a flicker of fire which came into contact with oil, divine energy erupted out as it rushed towards the mana realm. With the rush of divine energy flooding her body, Nimue and Addie, who were trying to keep her alive naturally, came in contact with this energy, as golden runes spread across their bodies. Feeling a cool energy spread through her body, Nimue couldn't help but feel relaxed as her mind drifted towards unconsciousness. However, with the danger of Shiro's body collapsing, she quickly woke herself up as she glanced at the mana realm. But when she did, she noticed the golden runes spreading along the borders as the pressure seemingly disappeared. Relaxing her efforts, she realized that the mana realm was now stabilizing itself as a golden energy seemed to flow through the mana links, reconnecting and healing them in the process. Feeling a little confused about this, Nimue wasn't able to say anything as her mind was beginning to drift off once more. Unable to hold on, she collapsed on the ground as she could see that Addie was in the same situation. The golden runes pulsed as a red crystal enveloped his body. Closing her eyes, she lost consciousness. While this was happening, Hades looked at Shiro with shock as a surge of divine energy erupted out of her, which had the power to repel his own. Glancing at his hand that was forced off her back, he understood what this meant. Her divinity surpassed his. Despite ruling over the concept of death and souls, his divinity was no match. A smile formed on his face as he observed the changes in her body. With her monolinks being broken previously, it gave way for the divine energy to seep into her body and enhance it in the place of mana. With golden energy pulsing through her veins and repairing her links, her physique was no different than when she had activated her skill ascension. The only difference was that this was now her base form rather than battle form, when she unleashed all of her power over her divinity. She's no different to a true god, demigod now. Her physique is the same as mine. Hades smiled. While there was more than just power and physique when it came to gods, it was no exaggeration to say that Shiro was a quarter of a step into proper godhood. Taking a step back, Hades glanced at Kalis. I don't know if I should call your granddaughter talented or monstrous. She's actually forging her own godly physique as we speak, and she stumbled upon this method herself. While I would say it's lucky, who's suicidal enough to destroy their own body to seek out divine energy? If she made a mistake, there was a chance she would have just died. Hades chuckled as Kellis looked at Shiro with worry. Men, should we do? Anything? He asked as he was concerned for her safety. Nope. We should just wait right now as divine energy is currently healing her. By the time she reawakens, she should be stronger than ever with a physique that is many times more powerful than people of her tier. Though there are still limitations when it comes to her level, she shouldn't have any problems. Hades smiled. I see. Kalis sighed in relief as he was nervous when she injured herself so heavily. But since she was speaking with determination and confidence, he decided to trust her choice. Thankfully, it paid off. Time passed as the divine energy slowly reinforced her body. Her links were completely repaired and were even better than their previous condition. Groaning softly, Shiro slowly opened her eyes as she realized that she had been unconscious for quite a while. Standing up, she expected to feel her body ache slightly, but it was strangely refreshed. You've finally woken up. Sleeping for a week in here is quite a surprise. Hades smiled as he appeared in the realm. I slept for a week? Shiro asked with disbelief as Hades nodded his head. It's not surprising considering that your body was getting used to divine energy. With what you have done, your physique has been improved and your mana seems to have been infused with the divine energy, Hades reminded as Shiro paused for a second. Ron Obasha is moving her arms around. She guessed that the divine energy was probably the reason as to why she felt so energetic right now. Glancing at her system, she noticed a few new notifications. Most of them were just health reports and notes about divine energy entering her system. However, the most important one was how both Nimue and Ati were undergoing evolutions after being infused with her divine energy. Glancing into her mana realm, Shiro could see both Nimue and Ati encased in a crystal, while Izuel and Estrella rested beside them. Looking up, she could see her mana links being lined with golden energy which radiated with a divine aura that Shiro recognized since she had used her ascension skill previously, and this feeling was unforgettable since both Nimue and Ati were undergoing an evolution right now. Shiro decided to not disturb them just yet. Right then, can you sense divine energy now? After this little upgrade sensing, it should be rather easy. Hades smiled as Shiro nodded her head, snapping her fingers. The same golden energy started to wrap around her arm as Hades nodded his, head in satisfaction. The original plan was to teach you how to isolate and use this without ascending, but with your upgrade, it seems like I no longer need to teach this. For the remaining time here, we're going to spend it teaching you how to enhance your spells and create new ones using divine energy, Hades said with a smile. Seeing as though Shiro could now bring out divine energy at will, it was only natural to assume that she could now use it without directly ascending. If he had to describe it using numbers, she had access to around 20 to 25% of her power as a demigod, and ascending would unlock the rest. Of course, he didn't know that she could easily change her demigod form into true god with a few skill combinations, but doing so had its drawbacks, as she would not be able to use divine energy at all for the next few days. At first, this backlash confused her a little since she didn't use divine energy outside of the form, but now it made sense. With her being able to use divine energy and having it infused into her body, not being able to use it would hinder her quite a bit during combat. For the next month or so, Shiro continued to train with Hades, as Callus would occasionally spar with her to see if her skills were battle-ready. After all, they needed to make sure that Shiro makes the most out of the divine energy in her body. If she wasted it on a skill that can be replicated using mana, she is essentially cutting out a majority of her power on purpose. Testing out different combinations for her divine energy, they discovered that she had the capacity to use 2 original divine energy spells and enhance 5 mana spells per day before she ran out of divine energy. This wasn't including the divine energy she would use for reinforcing her body, so if she was to include that, it would be around 1 original spell and 3 reinforcements. That wasn't bad, as the original spells created using only divine energy were many times stronger than her normal spells, but the only problem was creating one. So far, all of her ideas were able to be replicated with mana, so they couldn't be counted as divine energy spells. Even her world-class magic, Requiem of the Dead, could only be classed as half of a divine energy spell since the majority of it could be replicated using mana. The main requirements are mastery over souls and a large mana pool, but despite the lack of progress in making divine energy spells, Shiro had gotten used to enhancing her spells so the time wasn't wasted. During the weeks of training, she had noticed that the crystals were becoming foggier over time, but there was nothing she could do other than wait. In the last week of training, she heard a shattering sound in her mana realm as 2 notifications appeared on her interface. Nimue has evolved into Divine Spirit of Water. Atesh has evolved into Divine Spirit of Fire. Looking at the 2 spirits laying on the island with their eyes closed, Shiro raised her eyebrow as they looked rather different now. Previously, Nimue could switch between looking like a humanoid figure of water to a normal girl, but now she was similar to Izuel. Her hair was now a crystal blue that seemed to flicker between light blue and dark blue. Her physique seemed to have matured a little, and Shiro noticed some growth around the chest area. She wore a white and blue dress with what seems to be a translucent blue raiment that weaved under her arms and over her neck. Her dress stretched to her ankles, and she had a few golden accessories decorating her dress. With a pair of azure earrings in the shape of a water droplet and lined with gold, Nimue slept peacefully as Shiro could sense some divine energy emanating from her body. Atesh, on the other hand, grew from a baby to a young teen, as he seemed to be around 8 years old now. His red hair would flicker with shades of red, orange, and yellow as it looked like a dancing flame. He wore a sleeveless red shirt which was unbuttoned along with some slightly baggy trousers that reached his ankles, and a pair of black shoes that was lined with some gold. Similar to Nimue, his clothes matched his element as it was mostly red, but had some black to contrast the brightness of the red along with some golden markings around the edges. Groaning softly, Atesh slowly opened his eyes and rubbed them softly. Seeing this, Shiro quickly rushed over and helped him up. "Are you all right?" Shiro asked with concern as Atesh nodded his head slowly. Mama, does your body still hurt?" Atesh asked with a soft voice, as Shiro felt her heart beat hearing him say Mama to her. "I'm fine, thanks to you and Nimue." Shiro smiled softly as she stroked his hair. Me tired. I'm going to sleep." Atesh sighed in relief as he closed his eyes and leaned on Shiro's shoulder. Seeing that Atesh had forced himself to wake up over his worry for her, Shiro couldn't help but feel her heart soften as she laid his head on her thigh and stroked his hair. Feeling comfortable, Atesh shifted to make sure he got into the best position before sleeping peacefully. "Izuel, Estrella," Shiro called out softly as she didn't want to disturb Atesh's sleep. "I'm here," Izuel said as she appeared next to her and helped Nimue get into a more comfortable position. Resting Nimue's head on her lap, Izuel looked at Shiro as Estrella also appeared next to her. "Can you tell me what divine spirits are?" Shiro asked curiously as her system had told her that Nimue became the divine spirit of water, while Adi was the divine spirit of fire. Divine spirits are, as you can tell, spirits that are infused with godly energy. Becoming a divine spirit is the first step to completely mastering a certain element. But that's all I know, since there were only rumors about divine spirits. We couldn't confirm their existence before, but with Nimue and Atesh reaching this stage, it seems like it was more than just a rumor. Estrella smiled as she glanced down at Atesh and Nimue. "I see. Perhaps I should ask Hades about this. He might know more." Shiro said as both Izuel and Estrella nodded their heads. Taking a moment to rest up for a moment, Shiro asked Estrella to take her place as she focused on reality. "Hades," Shiro called, out as a swirl of shadows appeared beside her. "Man, what is it?" Hades asked as this was currently their break time. Once the break was over, they'll resume training. "Do you know anything about divine spirits?" Shiro asked as Hades thought about it for a moment. Aren't you one yourself?" Hades asked as Shiro furrowed her brows. "I think I was at one point." But I don't know much about it. Shiro shook her head. Well, divine spirits are blessed spirits that have the right to become a god eventually. They'll cultivate their own divinity of their element, but it's different from the god of an element. You see, a spirit divinity has a closer connection with the source of elements. Just like how there is a source of mana, or rather the origin, there's a source of elements. A divine spirit has a closer connection to the source of elements due to their nature as spirits. Of course, if a god has talent, it doesn't mean they can't reach the source of elements like how a spirit would, Hades explained as Shiro nodded her head. On obeys. So you're telling me that, for example, a divine spirit of water would be closer to the source of water than the water god? Shiro asked, just to be sure. That is correct, but reaching the source of elements is still rather difficult. For spirits, Hades shrugged. That makes sense. There's no free food in this world. There is always a price. Shiro agreed. Exactly. Anyways, we have around a week let in here. Shall we make the most out of it? Hopefully we should have a divine energy skill by the end of the week. If not, it doesn't matter, since we've already obtained plenty during the time we've spent here. Hades smiled. While Shiro was spending the last week in the pocket dimension, Nantien had finished training with Mio as he sat down by the side and caught his breath. Shiro should be coming out in a few hours, so we'll end it here, Mio said as she stored her sword away into her inventory. Well, I don't know how you two will end up. You better not harm her, or else God save you, I'll make sure you pay for what you have done. Literally. Mio narrowed her eyes as Nantien nodded his head. Despite being tier 6, he was completely dominated in one-on-one combat, which was to be expected since he's a mix of mage and warrior, while Mio was the extreme of offensive fighters. Take this. It'll help you defend yourself if someone gets into your blind spot. Since you've chosen Shiro as your target for protection, you're going to be her front line most of the time, Mio said, as she threw a mirror-like object towards catching the mirror. Nantien raised his eyebrow in surprise. Wouldn't this be better on Shiro? He asked curiously. Theoretically, yes, but it hinders quite a few of her skills, so it's better if you send it to her side with the second skill if she runs into trouble. Mio shrugged. Nodding his head, Nantien placed the mirror against his chest as it shattered, into pieces before disappearing around him. If one looked carefully, they could see what seemed like a thin, illusionary sheet of glass surrounding his body. Clutching his fists a few times, Nantien stretched his body. It's a little weird, but I suppose I'll get used to the feeling. He smiled as Mio nodded her head. I don't think me and Koji will be able to accompany Shiro often since we got our own share of trouble. Plus, we'll need to look after Kiyomi since she's not as strong as Shiro. While Kiyomi is better than average, she hasn't reached the upper stages yet, so she'll still need our help. Thankfully, Keiko is looking after her right now, so we don't have to interfere too much, but with the new age coming, I'm afraid we can't let her be anymore. At least not until she reaches tier 5. Mio sighed as she was both happy and sad that Kiyomi was, to put it bluntly, weak right now. If she was strong like Shiro, the dangers she'll face would cause her to worry endlessly every day, but at the same time, she couldn't protect herself properly in the new age. There was only so much she could do after all. I'm sure she'll do fine. The last time I saw them, I saw determination in her eyes. Seeing Shiro work hard must have lit something up in her as she's trying her best to catch up right now. Nantien smiled. Man, packing up everything, Mio made sure they didn't leave behind some belongings as they prepared for the trip back. While they didn't stay for a week, Citral had informed her about a few new intel she had obtained after interrogating a few souls. A few of the queens were on the move in the real world. Giving her body a stretch, Shiro had just finished the final training session in the pocket dimension, as they were currently preparing to make their way out. During the final week, Nimue had woken up and was shocked to see a slightly older Atesh, as she had also experienced some changes herself. She noticed that her control over the water around her increased dramatically, as she was even able to extract a bunch of water from the air, causing that area to dry up. In addition to this, Shiro had noticed that her combat ability had shot through the roof, as she was comparable to a high-level tier 5 when it comes to her element. Moreover, she had also discovered that Nimue received a new passive skill. Every attack that she sustains will have its damage cut, as her body would be turned to water. It also worked against fire attacks that would normally evaporate her since there was still water in the air. There was also the skill that allowed her to evade her death as long as a large body of water is nearby, which was rather handy as she is able to extract water from all around her to give herself a free revive. Of course, there was a cooldown to this, but it was extremely helpful since the range of revival was rather large. If she wanted, she could gather the water in an underground cave and revive there so that she wasn't pursued by her assailants. As for Atesh, he was in a similar situation only with fire. However, there was something rather special with his fire, as it was always filled to the brim with life energy. It was to be expected since he was a fusion that involved life fire, but at this stage, it was actually more potent than Shiro's life fire, and it had the potential to be as powerful as Grace. "Are you ready?" "Our time here has run out," Hades asked, as Shiro nodded her head. "And I am. While it's unfortunate that I didn't manage to make my own skill, it's still handy that I can now use divine energy whenever I want." Shiro smiled as Hades agreed. "But remember, while you can use divine energy, there is a limit to it. At most, you can cast 2 divine energy spells and 5 enhanced normal spells, so try not to waste it if you can," Hades reminded. "I know, don't worry." But man, making divine energy spells were harder than I thought. And here I was making new original spells with mana, left and right, with ease, but after 2 months in here, I haven't made a single divine energy spell. Shiro sighed. "Don't be hasty. It takes a while to make one. Plus, you have to really think outside the box for a divine energy spell. I'll be honest, even the soul hounds that I made last time were only half a divine spell. I do have 1 or 2 full divine energy spells, but using them is rather difficult." Hades chuckled, since his spell had some conditions he must pass before it could be activated. "Man, well, I'll probably think of something eventually. When I realize that I can't accomplish a task with my nanobots, I'll know I'll need divine energy." Shiro grinned as Hades nodded his head. "That's one of the ways to make your own divine energy spell." Talking for a little longer, they opened the portal and stepped through it. Upon stepping out, they saw Citral, Mio, and Nantien standing there with a smile. "Welcome back. Did you enjoy your time in there?" Mio asked Shiro with a smile as she nodded her head. "It was quite helpful." "Did anything happen while we were gone?" Shiro replied. "Something did happen. Your grandmother has found out some intel from one of the souls, and it seems like a few queens are making a move in the outside world. We don't know what they've done yet, so we're going to go have a look once you came out of the pocket dimension," Mio explained as Shiro frowned. We shouldn't waste more time then." Shiro narrowed her eyes before turning around and giving Kalis a hug. Walking up to Citral, she did the same for her. "It's been nice seeing you two." Shiro smiled as Citral chuckled. "It has. We'll see each other soon once the new age starts." Citral patted Shiro's head. Nodding her head, Shiro turned to Hades. "I suppose I'll also be seeing you in the new age." She chuckled as he nodded. "You will, but gods won't appear too early." The new age is split into 2 stages in terms of people appearing. The first stage includes queens, new monsters at the 6th tier, and maybe a few demigods, but they are rare. The second stage is when us gods and demon gods appear, Hades explained. As Shiro nodded her head, "Would you happen to know someone called Varen?" Shiro asked as Hades raised his eyebrow. "I hope you're not talking about demon god Varen." He forced a smile. "Unfortunately, that is who I'm talking about." Sigh. "How did you even come across his name?" Hades asked with a sigh. "I might have pissed him off, and he got his eyes on me now." Shiro shrugged. "How?" Hades asked with a confused expression, since she shouldn't be able to come into contact with Varen right now. "Well, me and Nantien kind of found his anchor and, well, might have heavily injured the Tier 6 guard he had on site." Shiro coughed lightly as Nantien nodded his head. "Ranobes. We were quite close to death at that time. The fact that you two are alive means you won that fight, I guess. He's a rather petty person like my brother, so I suppose he will try to get revenge on you. You have quite a few enemies, don't you?" Hades forced a smile as she had already pissed off a few people in the Greek pantheon, and now she's even made enemies with demon gods. He wouldn't be surprised if the gods banded together and launched a crusade against her when the time arrives. "Anyways, did you want to ask me anything about Varen?" Hades asked. "Well, I was just wondering if you knew about him or not. I might have to fight him in the future, so it'll be good to know something about him." Shiro shrugged as Hades thought about it for a moment before furrowing his brows. "I don't know much since he doesn't fight often. Most of his minions are rather powerful, so he doesn't have to make a move. But I will give you a tip on gods. If a god is easy to kill, you haven't killed him. Gods cannot be killed by normal means. You can inflict pain on them, but they won't die. You have to target a specific part of them that's in a different existence before you can kill him. Naturally, targeting it is rather difficult, since it's normally located in their own domain. If you were to aim for them there, they'll notice immediately. Sneak attacks against them are rather hard as well, unless you're a super high-level assassin that's in the realm of demigod or god," Hades cautioned. "That's good to know." Shiro nodded her head, while she knew that the gods couldn't be killed through conventional means. At least now she knew that most of them kept the core of their being in their own domain. With knowledge on where it is, it'd be helpful in future fights, so that she didn't waste time searching for it during the fight. Talking for a little longer, Shiro said her goodbyes as the 3 of them made their way back to the portal they had used to enter this place. Looking at the maids lined up by the side and bowing towards them with respect, Shiro couldn't help but feel a little awkward, but she hid her awkwardness away. Cutting her finger, Mio opened the portal and gestured for them to go through. Glancing back at the mansion in the distance, she could see Hades give her one final wave as she did the same and stepped through. Feeling her true spirit nature cancel immediately, Shiro sighed softly since it meant that the time limit of 1 minute had returned. Thankfully, it had reset the moment she returned, so she still had 1 minute worth of true spirit nature left that can be used whenever. Immediately pulling out her phone, she checked on information regarding the queens. Raising an eyebrow, Shiro was shocked to see news on 3 queens that were currently making a move near a few of the major cities. The cities that were involved were New York, Shanghai, and Manila. There were photos and news reports on anchors that suddenly appeared in the sky and slammed into the center of the cities. New York was a rather low-leveled city, which confused Shiro as to why they would target that since the mana in the area was rather low. However, as she was not them, she didn't know their thought process. There was only one problem, though, and that was each of them were quite far away from each other. To get to them all, she'd need to expend quite a bit of effort. By the time she'd finished helping the first city, the other 2 would probably be taken over. Furrowing her brows, she saw that Manila and Shanghai were the closest in terms of location on the map. It would be better for her to help Manila, then move over to Shanghai, rather than attend to New York. Seeing the expression on her daughter's face, Mio smiled softly. "Do you want me and your dad to sort out the one in New York? It's rather far from the other 2, so while you take care of them, we'll take care of this stray one," Mio suggested with a smile. Furrowing her brows, Shiro was worried about the safety of her parents. After all, they had Tier 6 guards with them, and taking care of them as a Tier 5 was rather difficult. The only reason Shiro could face off against them and even kill them was because they took them by surprise, and Shiro had Nantian distracting the most annoying one, as he was also a Tier 6. However, neither Mio or Koji were Tier 6, so fighting them was very risky. "Ha ha ha, seems like you're looking down on your mum's power." Mio grinned as she ruffled Shiro's hair. "It's not that. I know both you and Dad are strong, but this is a Tier 6 we're talking about. The chances of dying are very big." Shiro furrowed her brows in worry. "Don't worry. As a Reaper, it would be quite embarrassing if I failed to take a soul now, wouldn't it?" Mio chuckled, but Shiro still had her worried. Snapping her fingers, nanobots surged in front of her as it morphed into a pair of earrings and bracelets. "Take these, Mum. I've embedded the earrings with 5 charges of grace and the same with the bracelets. Give the bracelets to Dad so that if you 2 take any serious damage, you can heal yourselves back to full health. The earrings and bracelet also include the skill Kitoma, so if you're in danger, you can freeze their body and stop them for a second," Shiro said as she passed the items over to Mio. She wanted to infuse the skills from Pandora's Requiem, but so far, she had been unsuccessful even with the help of divine energy, so the most she could do was give her the most utility-focused skills. She had, in order to help her parents end the fight quickly. She didn't need to give them offensive spells since her parents were both offensive fighters. She didn't need to worry. Receiving these items, Mio had a soft smile on her face as she nodded her head. "Don't worry. Me and your dad will be careful. Okay? We wouldn't want to leave Lil Shiro and Lil Kiyomi behind now, would we?" Mio reassured as Shiro sighed and nodded her head. Seeing her parents' expression, she understood that they weren't about to give up anytime soon. "Just be careful, okay? It's cruel, but New York is just a low-leveled city. I don't know why they chose it, but if it gets out of hand, just give up on it and come back," Shiro said as Mio nodded her head. Making their way back to the house, Shiro could hear the sound of wooden swords clashing against one another in the dojo, as she understood that Kanai and Irina were still training with Koji. Opening the dojo door, she saw the 3 in the middle of the fight. Shiro ni! Kanai's eyes brightened as Koji's sword suddenly knocked her on the head. "Wah!" Taking a few steps back, Kanai quickly rubbed her head. "Don't get distracted in battle even if it is Shiro," Koji said as Kane pouted slightly. "We'll take a break." "Now," he said as he stored the sword away and walked over to the 3 of them. "How was it?" he asked with a smile. "It was good. Mom and Dad seemed rather happy with Shiro, and she'd even gotten a bit of training." Mio chuckled. "That's good." "Say, Dad, I heard that you were apparently rather rude to Gramps when you took Mum," Shiro said with a smug grin as Koji coughed. "Embarrassingly. It was in the heat of the moment." Koji scratched his head as Shiro laughed. "Right. Anyway, how is Kanai and Irina's training?" Shiro asked. "It's only been a few days, so the effects aren't obvious. However, Kanai has talent with the sword, and I can probably get Irina up to a decent level. It's not to say that she doesn't have talent, but she's not fit for how I teach the sword. The most I can do is help her improve to the point she can defend herself." Koji glanced at Irina, who was struggling for breath. "Renobes? That's fine. I'll help her with some body reinforcement with mana, and she should be able to handle herself." Shiro nodded her head as she planned to give her a manual on body reinforcement once she finished her rest. "On a different note, what do you think? About taking a trip to New York?" One of the queens seems to be rather eager to take over the city, Mio asked with a soft smile as Koji placed a hand on his chin. I don't see why not. Plus, I'm somewhat curious about how I would fare against a tier 6. Koji nodded his head. Hace, you're taking it too easily. A tier 6 can easily kill a tier 5 with a snap of their finger. We're just abnormal for being able to stand against one previously. I know you and Mom are also abnormal in the strength area, but don't down on them, okay? Even if you try to overestimate them some more in case they have something up their sleeve. Shiro sighed as she had experienced this situation before. In Arya, when she was tier 6, people still underestimated her despite trying to overestimate. Naturally, the outcome was death, as with most things that were connected to Nutri. And don't worry, Daddy can take care of himself. Koji had a teasing smile on his face as he picked Shiro up. Oh, damn it, Dad. I'm not a kid, so don't call yourself Daddy. Shiro gritted her teeth in embarrassment as she hit her dad on the head. Of course, it wasn't hard otherwise. Koji's body might have been flung out of the room. Laughing for a moment, Koji let Shiro down. Well, let's see. I don't think it'll take too long, so Kanai and Irina can stay here for a bit while they digest all the information they've been taught, Koji said as Mio nodded her head since she didn't mind. After talking for a while, they decided to have some food as they were getting ready to move to the different cities. Shiro's first destination would be Manila, where she'll go deal with the queen there before moving to Shanghai. Once she's finished in Shanghai, she wanted to find the old sectmaster and ask him about Isilia. After all, the system did say that he knew where she was. Once they finished the food, Shiro gave Koji and Mio a hug as she watched them teleport away in the teleport shrine. Naturally, they weren't reckless to teleport into the heart of danger, so they chose a shrine a little further away. With her parents now gone, Shiro prepared to teleport away with Nantian. Stay safe out there, Shironi, Kanai said as she had worry on her face. She was too weak to follow, so the best she could do was tell her to be careful. Don't worry, I can take care of myself. Shiro grinned and patted Kanai's head. Giving her a wave, Shiro and Nantian teleported away. Arriving at the edge of Manila, Shiro immediately noticed a change in mana as a notification appeared on her interface. You have stepped into the domain of Queen Aisha. As an enemy queen, you will experience the following effects while in this domain: 20% to all stats, 20% effectiveness to all queen-related spells, 20% system assistance. Apparently, the queen is called Aisha. I wonder what kind of queen she is, Shiro muttered, as their title could give her a clue on what their strengths are. For example, Limra was the vampiric queen, so Shiro knew that she should probably be wary of her absorbing something from her body. If she knew what Aisha was the queen of, it'll be a lot easier. Shall we investigate a little first and ask the residents about what's happening? Nantian asked as Shiro nodded her head. Since I don't need to kill all the queens to win the new age, we might be able to get ourselves an ally, Shiro replied. Though it'll be rather tough with her pride. After all, she's the leader of a race, and serving under someone might be a rather annoying thought for her. It's like if someone asked you to serve under them, which I doubt you'd enjoy. Nantian shrugged. True. But if she doesn't like it, slaughtering her is also an option. Shiro grinned as they exited the teleport shrine. Currently, they were just outside of the city as a giant crystal could be seen floating in the center of the city as it would pulse out with a mystic energy every so often. With Shiro's perception, she could tell that this energy was supplying a barrier of sorts, but there wasn't a barrier being erected around the city. This could either mean that she didn't detect the barrier, or that it was storing energy. Both options were likely as Shiro snapped her fingers and made some nanobots in the air in front of her. Controlling them to fly towards the crystal, Shiro and Nantian attempted to enter the city. Glancing into the distance, they could see the sea as well as what seemed to be a ruin of sorts protruding out of the water surface. If you're wondering about that, it's a large-scale dungeon. The loot is rather nice, and each level of the dungeon has a different level limit. You can theoretically just stay in Manila and take your time to level up until you're level 200. Nantian explained as Shiro raised her eyebrow. What world is it even linked to, then? Most dungeons are fixed at a level unless they mutate, no? Shiro asked curiously. No idea, but there are quite a few scholars that are studying this dungeon specifically since cases like this are rather rare. I would say that we can probably try to meet one right now, but with how things are, it might be a little difficult. Who knows? If Aisha is a tyrannical queen, she might kill all those that won't follow her lead. Nantian said as Shiro agreed with him since Limra was probably one of those people. Remembering the hate-filled faces of those who glared at her after she ruined their city, Shiro couldn't help but sigh. Shaking her head, she dismissed the thoughts and walked towards the city. Unlike the other cities they've been to, there weren't city walls or guards checking your ID before you can enter. You were allowed to go in and out whenever you wanted. Of course, there are guards walking around patrolling to ensure public order, so they still had to behave themselves. Most of the guards here were around level 150 to 200. Shiro couldn't see. Anyone that was in the realm of Tier 5, which is to be expected, since this level was achieved by a small percent of people in the entire world. Roundabout. Walking around the city, they couldn't spot anyone belonging to Queen Aisha, so they decided to go to a bar for now to see if they could get any information, such as rumors. After all, there was a good chance that people would talk about the big crystal in the sky and the queen associated with it. Making their way to one of the bigger bars that they could find, Shiro and Nantian sat down near the window while listening to their surroundings. Most of the talks were about what they had been doing during the day, scheduling some parties as well as troubles in the family. Surprisingly, no one mentioned the crystal at all. Furrowing her brows, Shiro found this a little strange as she downed her cocktail and walked over to the bar counter. "Excuse me?" Shiro called out as a bartender glanced over. "Yes? What can I get for you?" she asked respectfully. "I just got a question. Do you know what's up with the giant crystal in the sky?" Shiro asked with a smile as the bartender furrowed her brows and gestured for Shiro to lean in. "Please don't mention anything about the crystal out in public," the bartender warned as Shiro raised her eyebrow. Before she could say anything, the bartender only handed her the same cocktail she had ordered earlier, taking this as a sign that she didn't want to talk about this anymore. Shiro made her way back to Nantian. "So did she say anything about it?" Nantian asked. "Nope. Apparently, we shouldn't be talking about it in public." Shiro sighed and shook her head. Just as she was about to take a sip of her cocktail, she felt something wrong, as her instincts were telling her not to drink it. Frowning slightly, she summoned some nanobots and analyzed her drink. After a second, she narrowed her eyes at the bartender as her drink had been spiked with a substance similar to aphrodisiac, only the concentration was much higher. Picking up her glass, she walked towards the bartender and narrowed her eyes. "Would you happen to know what's in this glass?" Shiro asked with a smile. However, the bartender did not panic as she only had a smile on her face. "You have good instincts," she praised as Shiro narrowed her eyes and reached out towards her collar. Grabbing her by the neck, Shiro threatened to pour the drink down the bartender's mouth. "Why did you do this?" Shiro questioned with a frown. "Ha ha ha ha. Do it, please. Give me that drink if you don't want it." The bartender had a crazed look in her eyes as her gaze didn't leave the cocktail. Feeling disgusted, Shiro immediately let go of the woman and poured the cocktail away. "Really, you shouldn't let go of your enemy so easily," the bartender shrugged, as she quickly adjusted her clothes so that she looked proper once more. "Who are you?" Shiro narrowed her eyes. "I'm just a bartender." The woman smiled. "Bullshit," Shiro retorted as she summoned her sword. Sighing softly, the bartender only shrugged. "So, aggressive. Fine, let me reintroduce myself then." Wave her hand in front of her face. The woman's hair flickered as it changed into a silver blonde that reached her lower back. Her eyes were similar to Shiro's, as they were also blood red. Glancing at her title card, Shiro narrowed her eyes. Aisha, Queen of Trickery. "For a Queen of Trickery, you sure are bad at your job," Shiro joked as Aisha shrugged her shoulder. "Are you sure?" she asked with a smile as Shiro's body instantly heated up. Widening her eyes, Shiro felt as though she had just lost all of her resistances as the alcohol started to act up in her system. But what was strange was that she knew she wasn't drunk. It was a mental effect. Furrowing her brows, Shiro stood her ground. "Oh my, how surprising. Despite tricking your mind to believe it is super drunk, you can wrestle yourself out of it. Well, somewhat." Aisha clapped her hand as Shiro wanted to jump back slightly to make some distance, but just as she attempted this, she felt her body move to the side and fall over, which confused her since her movement had been completely jumbled. Quickly analyzing her movements, Shiro barely stood up before the controls were messed up once more. "You adapt rather fast, too. You are quite fun. Why don't you be my doll from now on?" Aisha asked with a smile, as she was akin to a puppeteer with invisible strings. Gritting her teeth, Shiro tried to jump back after adjusting to the new controls. While the controls were flipped midway, she was still successful in making some distance between them. "Now then, I wonder how you'll entertain me." Aisha smiled creepily as she clapped her hand. Suddenly, Shiro felt something puncture her lung as she coughed up a mouthful of blood. Glaring towards her, Shiro forced herself to stand up with some difficulty. "I knew something was wrong, but to think you were in a fight," Nantian said as he flickered next to Shiro. Seeing his expression, Shiro knew that he wasn't in the best of moods right now. "Oh, you broke through the illusion?" Aisha chuckled. When Shiro went to talk to you, she was furious. The fact that you two talked for quite a while in the illusion was suspicious to begin with. Nantian replied as he flickered next to her and grabbed her face. Bang! Slamming her against the ground, Nantian twisted his body and threw her through the wall. "Ha! Are you all right?" Nantian asked with a concerned gaze, and quickly jogged over to Shiro. Helping her up on her feet, he frowned at her state since he noticed that her body control was all over the place. "Give me a second. I'm going to see if I can fix this." Shiro said as Nantian nodded his head. But before the two could relax, they realized that Aisha had already appeared beside them. Are you sure I'll give you that time? She said with a small smile as Nantian quickly summoned his sword and slashed towards her. But just as he did this, he felt his movements become restricted as the sword spotted in front of her face. You know, the moment you entered the city, I already knew that you two were powerful, so I made a few adjustments. Neither of you have ridiculous physical strength, so I don't need to worry too much. For mages, I'm one of the worst counters, you know? Aisha giggled as she swiped with her hand. Suddenly, several cut marks appeared on both Shiro and Nan. Tien's body as blood started to flow. Gritting her teeth, Shiro decided to do something risky. Slamming her hand against her chest, she scanned her whole body within that moment and pinpointed the problem. Furrowing her brows, Shiro summoned her. Sword. However, the controls flipped once more as the sword pierced towards her abdominal area. Tusk, tusk, tusk. Don't go cutting yourself now. Aisha chuckled, but Shiro only smiled. She wanted this, and even if Aisha didn't force her to stab herself, she would have done it anyway. Jamming her sword deeper, she grinned as she flooded her insides with nanobots, which consumed her organs in an instant. This display of cruelty towards herself shocked Aisha, as this was the first time that this had ever happened in front of her. But before she could do anything, she watched as fire erupted out of Shiro, and her body was healed. Up in an instant. You know, ingesting the little parasite was rather annoying, but it's not too bad. It's just a matter of cutting it out. Shiro laughed as she flickered next to Aisha. You're crazy. Aisha forced a smile as this was the first time that someone had broken out of her spell in such a manner. Flicking her wrist, Aisha jumped back as Shiro's movements were restrained. Activating analysis, her eyes flickered for a moment as she could see all of the invisible wires that didn't radiate any mana signal at all. Making a pair of glasses, Shiro threw them towards Nantian. Wear these, she said, before dashing towards Aisha and narrowly evading the wires. Nodding his head, Nantian caught the glasses and saw that his body was being bound. Unfortunately, he was bound rather tightly, so it took him a moment to get out. Thankfully, Shiro was keeping Aisha busy, so he was given a few moments to get himself out of the restrictions. While Nantian was getting himself out of the bindings, Shiro was trying to strike towards Aisha as best she could, but she was always just a little short. Ranobo even. After activating the boundary, Aisha seemed too slippery. What's worse was that despite the fact that they were fighting, the surroundings seemed to not react at all as everyone was continuing their day like nothing. What happened? You did something to them, didn't you? Shiro asked as lightning erupted out from her body. Increasing her speed, she dashed in front of Aisha and slashed towards her neck. Whatever could you mean? Aisha grinned as several pairs of hands tried to restrain her, but her lightning torched anyone that grabbed her. So cold-hearted. Killing them without even batting an eye. Aisha laughed as Shiro only shrugged while trying to kill her. Killing you will prevent more casualties. I'm sorry, but I never said I was a good person, Shiro replied as Aisha frowned slightly. Nimue, can you give me some help? Shiro asked as Nimue's control of water could be rather handy right now due to the fact that they're near the sea. Don't worry, I'm already working on something. Nimue replied as she was currently working on a magic circle. As she had only recently become a divine spirit, it took some getting used to, so her spells would take a little longer to be prepared. Mama, do you want me to help? Addie called out as Shiro chuckled. It's fine. Mommy can deal with this pest, Shiro replied. Pfft. Mommy. Nimue snickered as a nanotech bat appeared behind Nimue and clubbed her on the head. Blurg. Oh, hush it. Shiro humphed before turning her focus back to Aisha. Dragging her hand across the ground, several ice spears appeared before shooting towards her. Unfortunately, they were blocked by her invisible wires. Realizing that Aisha was baiting her right now, Shiro wasn't keen on following. Since you want me to follow you so bad, I will. But before I go, I need to grab a little accessory. Girls like me can't go out without some decorations after all. Shiro grinned as she clenched her hand into a fist. Suddenly, a blanket of nanobotsum appeared in the air and wrapped around the crystal in an instant. Widening her eyes, Aisha looked up in shock as Shiro appeared beside her. However, her shock turned into joy as she smiled. Fooled ya. Flexing her fingers, mana burst out of Aisha as Shiro felt danger all around her. Are you sure? Nantian's voice rang out as he appeared beside Shiro. Pushing out his hands, a barrier of sorts erupted out as a shattering sound could be heard. Bang! With the barrier crashing into her, Aisha was pushed away as she slammed against the ground. Thanks. Shiro smiled as she could count on Nantian to cover her back. I'm ready, Nimue called out as her magic circle had finished its construction. Nodding. Her head, Shiro slammed her hand against the ground as a Nimue appeared beside her with her magic circle. Pushing her magic circle into the sky above them, Shiro watched as it expanded out and enveloped the entire city. Suddenly, droplets of water formed in the air as they slowly morphed into needles. If it was just one or two, it would be fine, but every single spot in the city seemed to be filled with this needle as Shiro could feel her mana drain. Since she and Nimue were connected, it was only natural that Nimue would be using her mana to power the spell. Flicking her hand out, Nimue controlled all of the needles to pierce towards Aisha. While this was happening, Shiro had cast her own spells as electricity flickered around her. Making a fist with her right hand and a palm on her left, she placed her fist on her palm and lightning gathered in her hand. Opening her fist, a small lightning serpent could be seen as Shiro narrowed her eyes. The serpent seemed to come alive as it shot forward. Suddenly, 2 Tier 6 magic circles appeared in front of it, as it seemed to enlarge with every magic circle it passed. Eventually, it enlarged to become a giant lightning dragon which swallowed the spot that Aisha was in. Boom! Exploding and evaporating all of the water, Shiro watched as Nantien shot forward with his sword and slashed down. Pushi! Seeing Aisha being cut in half, Shiro sighed in relief but didn't drop her guard. How annoying. You actually caught me at my weakest. No worries, though. This is just a branch of my anchor. Aisha laughed as her body sewed itself back together. Clasping her hand together, a portal opened up under her as she waved her hand and disappeared.